Welcome to the DMF. I am your host, Justin Yance. Today, my guest is Faye Viviana. She is a director, a producer, a writer, an actress, and she's also a former dancer. Enjoy. Okay, I have a special guest with me today. I have Faye Viviana. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to talk to you. So, the first thing I wanted to ask you is, what was it like growing up in Albuquerque, New Mexico? Yeah.
um, Albuquerque is an interesting place. It's very good weather. It has all 4 seasons, but it doesn't rain much, so it's very sunny. It's got a lot of like
Yeah.
outdoorsy things. So as a kid, I was really into dance. That was actually my first career. So most of my life revolved around dance in some way. So that was mostly what I did there. I left when I was 15 to move to New York to dance.
Mm.
So yeah, most of my childhood was pretty much in a dance studio in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What led you to dance? Was there something specific about dance?
Well, actually, it's interesting. I have a pretty severe scoliosis, which is like a
Hmm.
side-to-side curvature of the spine, and I was
Yeah.
diagnosed with it when I was 8. So prior to that, I did like a lot more different things: gymnastics, swimming, diving, tennis, things like that. But the impact is actually not great for it. So
Mm.
dance was sort of the most back-friendly
Yeah.
hobby. Um, and then so I kind of started doing more of that than the other things. And then um, when I was around 10, 9.5, 10, I actually had to have a back brace, and I didn't
Mm.
have to wear the brace when I took dance classes. So I took every single dance class I could sign up for because I didn't want to wear the brace. So that's
Yeah.
actually kind of like how I ended up becoming a dancer. It's because I didn't want to wear the brace. So
Interesting. Interesting. So yes. So like, what age did you start at for dance?
I was 5.
5. Okay. So
Yeah.
you were already like kind of did some dance, and then once you kind of figured out as you got older that you're gonna have to wear this back brace and all this other stuff, that then it became more of a career.
Yeah.
Was there something about ballet that like really just spoke to you?
Yeah, actually, I often refer to it as like my native language. I
Mm.
really love it. I miss doing it a lot. Getting injured was a devastating period of my life, but I I really like that. It sound a little weird, but I like that with movement, and especially like performance-based movement. Like the audience like has to watch you, so you can go
Mm.
out on the stage and essentially say anything and they have to listen. Like that's kind of the way it feels to me. And I wasn't great at like speaking up as a kid.
Mm.
So I liked that it was like this thing that I had where I could say whatever I wanted to say with my movement and nobody could tell me otherwise. They had to listen. It was kind of this strange, empowering thing for me. Um, and yeah, it was very much like my therapy sort of as well,
Yeah.
growing up and getting through your teenage years and stuff. Like dance was definitely a grounding.
Were
Um,
your parents encouraging with this? Did they like
yeah,
you did dance?
yeah. I think I when I was like 7, I was like, I want to be a microbiologist, and my family's very academic, so they were
Yeah.
all excited about that. And then at like 8 or 9, I was like, ballet. So I'm not sure if that was like a little bit of a letdown from microbiologists, but
Yeah.
I did
I want to
get
be a
good at it.
princess now.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
I remember they said, if you get a scholarship, you can go wherever you get a scholarship to. So, um, I was good enough of a dancer to get those scholarships, and I think that helped. That they felt like I could really do it. I could really pursue it. So they were very supportive of me in that regard.
Interesting. And then you went to New York. When you were studying ballet, what was that like?
Well, I mean, I love New York, so I loved living
Yeah.
there. I had so much freedom for a 15-year-old when you think about it, like on my own, just going to
Wow.
movies, by myself. I had a TV in my room for the first time. So I was like just my whole like world opened, in this kind of funny way. So the like just living on my own in New York City aspect of it was awesome. And then the training, I was privileged enough to be studying at it's a mouthful, but the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis School at American Ballet Theater. But it's a wonderful program and they have excellent teachers. And I got to study with just some of the best, and it was a really wonderful experience. Yeah.
Do you think studying there forced you to be tougher?
Maybe. I mean, dance forces you to be tougher. Like if you want to really dance, you have to work so hard and you have to sacrifice a lot of like personal, social things, like I didn't really go to prom. I didn't really date. I didn't really, like I just dance all the time.
Very forward thinking.
Yeah. So that kind of makes you tough because you have to decide that you want it that bad. And you see, kids your age around you not wanting it that bad. And so you kind of have to like be willing to put yourself out there and be the weirdo that like wants it that bad,
And you know what you want, and everybody else is trying to kind of like figure out what they want. And you're like, you have this singular goal.
Yeah. That's also what I kind of miss about that life is that you had this very singular goal. Like your goal each day was very clear. It was wake up, dance better than yesterday, go to bed. The simplicity of it was awesome. I so wish I could create that kind of simplicity in my life now. It's like not possible in any other career, but.
Interesting. We'll circle back to that. Do you mind talking a little bit about the injury? I know it's kind of a personal thing. Oh, okay. So was it something specific that happened, or was it just wear and tear over
I fell. So we were on tour in this cool place called White Oak, which is a private island off the coast of the border of Georgia and Florida. And it was owned by the guy who invented glossy paper for magazines. Sorry, it doesn't sound real, but it's a real place. And he was obsessed with Baryshnikov, and he created this gorgeous dance facility for Baryshnikov to come dance in. And it's divided into thirds. So a third of it is a dance sort of studios and places to practice. And then a third of it is a wildlife preserve. So there's all these endangered animals. There's like cheetahs and giraffes and zebras. And I got to pet a cheetah. It was like wild. Oh, wow. And then the other third of it is like a Hubble telescope. It's like dedicated to astronomy. So it's a fascinating place. So that's where we were. We were actually doing a choreography retreat with a guy named Robert Sund, who's setting a new piece. And I was in a rehearsal, thankfully not on stage when this happened, but I slipped sort of like over my left big toe going that way. And my kneecap went out, my leg bent sideways, and I actually landed on my femur bone when I fell. So I tore pretty much everything except for my ACL. I had multiple meniscus tears. I landed on the like end of my thigh bone. So I had all this damage to the bone. My kneecap actually went out so hard that it left bruises on like the side of my thigh bone. Oh, wow. It was pretty gnarly. My leg was like dangling. Like pretty much everything had torn. So that's how it happened. And then I was 17 at the time. So my growth plates weren't closed yet. So they couldn't operate right away because it messes with your like leg length. So I basically had to wait an entire year before they could operate on me. So I just had this like year of hell of just trying to do physical therapy to prepare myself for the surgery. Because we were on this little island, there was no like hospital there. So they had to like take me to the mainland, and the closest like medical center was this brand new urgent care in Florida. They had never used their x-ray machine before. Oh, no. They didn't believe that I could hurt myself that badly doing a dance move. That was what the doctor said. So they actually did a full sprain test, which is like, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they like yank and twist. So the doctor was like yanking and twisting my like already broken leg because he didn't think that it was possible for me to be injured.
Did you kind of have an idea of what the injury was, since just being a dancer, you're pretty familiar with your body?
Something was really bad. I mean, it was loud when it happened. You could like hear things like ripping and popping and stuff. So I was pretty like, I used to fall a lot, you know, like dancers actually have to fall a lot just in rehearsal. You go for things you fall. So I fall a lot, or fell a lot, not fall. I fell a lot. And so it wasn't weird for me to fall, but the amount of noise it made really did give me pause. So I remember I did not stand up right away because there was a part of me that was like, something really bad just happened.
Yeah.
And nobody stopped dancing right away because, again, we're all so used to falling, right? They're like, Faye fell, whatever.
That's like in Black Swan,
like, when I didn't get up, they were like, ooh, the music stopped. They ran over, like, are you okay? And I remember just being like, I'm not sure, because I actually had torn so many of the nerves. I couldn't feel anything. So it took like 5 minutes for my nerves to like start screaming. Yeah. And then I was like, somebody take me to the hospital. Like something's really wrong, you know? But for like a bizarrely long time, you're just kind of sitting there being like, I think this is really bad, but I don't know yet. Like I'm just waiting for all the like processing to happen. So it was a brutal way to do it. It's a pretty common like football injury, actually. When they get tackled from like the side. And the guy who eventually did my surgery was the surgeon for the Giants, Russell Warren. Yeah, so I got very lucky. The company like pulled some strings, and he specialized in shoulder and knees in young athletes, basically like under 26. And you know, he worked for the Giants, and they were like, I think this is the guy. Like, if you want to walk again or dance again, you're gonna need this guy. No, I mean, my leg was literally like dangling. It was really gross. And my whole leg swelled up because you like internally bleed from all that tearing. And
that's got to be, and for you going from being singular focus and be like, okay, you can't do anything, just sit here and
you're just waiting to find out. And you gain weight because you go from exercising like 50 hours a week to like laying on your back all day with your leg in a thing. And
so physically and emotionally it was just taxing.
I think emotionally I kind of just didn't deal with it. I was pretty like, I just sort of, I dealt with it later, but at the time I kind of was like, well, okay, like this happened, we don't know yet what the result is. And then once it was about 5 months before I could walk unassisted, so no crutches, things like that. So I had so much physical therapy to do. And then at that point, I think they knew that they were going to operate. So it was kind of like waiting to see how that went. And in the meantime, I actually turned down my contract with the company, because once you're under contract, it's really like, they keep trying to get you back on stage, not because they're mean, but because they need you on, like that's the job, right? So one of my mentors at the time said, if you really want to heal properly, you should not sign your contract so that they're not constantly trying to throw you back on early, so that you can really heal. And that was a very hard decision to make. But during that time, I remember very distinctly having a gut feeling that there was more wrong with my knee than they were telling me. Like there was something in me that kind of knew, even with the surgery, I might not be able to dance again. And so I was kind of like,
do you think because you were like in that island and you were kind of isolated, that if it happened, say like in New York, where like, I'm sure they've seen this
medical
before.
care.
would they have been, was it something like that, or was it just?
I certainly would have been treated better, like gotten better treatment. Definitely. Because, that place, like the sprain test probably did damage it more. I was basically just like a little lawsuit waiting to happen. I actually never sued or anything because I was like 17 years old, and like, you don't even think about that when you're that age. But looking back as an adult, I go like, that was just malpractice all over the place. And then it took like 3 weeks. Like I couldn't travel back to New York by myself because then I was in a wheelchair. So it took like 3 weeks for me to like get in to see like the regular doctor in New York. And it took such a long time to sort of get a proper diagnosis. And I think if I had gotten hurt in New York, where, the company has their own like PTs that could have assessed me, they could have sent me immediately to a hospital. Like,
because he didn't know, he wasn't a specialist in the area of what to do. But interesting.
So half the possibly that had something to do with it, but the nature of the injury itself was so extreme that,
Yeah.
Even though I'm not sure the sprain test didn't help, I actually don't remember. It's like blacked out. I think it
Yeah.
was so painful physically that I like, my manager at the time was with me, and she actually had to leave the building because I was screaming so, like, in such a way that it was like so disturbing to listen to, that she actually like had to leave the room. So I'm sure it was awful, and it would have been nice to not have gone through that, but I don't even remember it. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that's
my
good.
body was like,
That's
we'll
good.
protect you from that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just remember the film Black Swan. I'm a big movie guy, so it's like,
Mhm.
had you seen that? Is that a
Yeah,
movie,
I
or
have
was that,
seen
or
it.
is that something you would be like, I'm doing ballet. I don't want any of those thoughts in me.
Um, no, I mean, I saw it. A lot of my old colleagues were dancers in it.
Yeah,
Yeah, or doubled for you know, some of the
because they did
actors.
it like Lincoln Center, I think.
Yeah,
Some
yeah.
of
So
it.
it's
Yeah,
it's not based on that company, but they definitely used a good amount of those dancers. And I thought it was a good movie. I mean, it's a
yeah,
psychological horror, right? So it's kind of
yeah.
its own genre thing. But
Well, it's Darren Aronofsky. I mean, he did
yeah,
Requiem for a Dream. He's not going to cut any points, but I just remember that part in the film where he picks her up, she kind of falls, and I was just like, as soon as you were telling me the story, I'm like, just immediately go to that image or whatever.
yeah.
She didn't break everything. What you had was much more severe. So moving on a little bit, with acting, how did that come about? Because you were going to Jackie Onassis, and then you went somewhere else. Had you been dabbling in acting a little bit?
Yeah, so I basically went from the JKO school straight into the company. They have like it's not quite a junior company at the time. It was called Studio Company, but it was like a smaller group of very young dancers that they're kind of getting ready for the main company, and they did their own tours and stuff. So I was part of that. So I was actually already professionally dancing and under contract. And when I got hurt, I had taken a couple acting classes previously for a certain piece we had done. It's an
Mm,
Anthony Tudor ballet called Lilac Garden.
mm,
And it's his stuff has like a lot of plots and a lot of like gestural movement and very like emotional storylines. And I remember thinking, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm just like, I don't know how to do this like emotional thing. Like I was like,
yeah.
I feel like this needs acting and I don't even know anything about acting. So I actually had taken a couple acting classes for that piece specifically. And I thought, wow, this is a lot of fun. And I always assumed my career would be a little bit short because of my back.
Mm,
So I thought, well, maybe this is something I can like transition to when I retire, because dancers retire when they're like 35. I figured I'd
yeah.
probably retire around 30. So I was like, this will be a great little
Yeah.
segue into whatever I do next. This could be what I do next. I remember really liking the classes. So then when I got hurt, and I had basically 2 years of just physical therapy and then the surgery and then more physical therapy before I could even find out whether or not I could dance again.
Mm,
During that time, I couldn't handle sitting in the studio and watching all of my friends get promoted and dance all these great roles. It was just too depressing. So I actually went to acting school to sort of like kill time. And because it took so long for me to find out that I couldn't dance, I actually got like 2 years of like acting conservatory training because I was
oh,
taking all
wow.
these acting classes all the time. And so when I found out that I couldn't dance professionally, um,
It
I kind
wasn't
of had
such a
already been doing it.
Yeah, it wasn't such a this shock of what am I going to do. You had already started kind of figuring it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Again, my parents were kind of like, are you sure you don't want to do microbiology?
Same thing
I
with
was like,
my
acting.
parents.
They're like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Same thing here. Um, was because you talked about was it seeing a play, and that's really what kind of, like you said, like it was a black box theater that you
It
that
was. I
like
will never
really
forget it. It was a tiny, tiny off Broadway little show called Ghost on Fire, which I
where
actually,
was it in New York? Was it in New York?
yeah, it was like in the Lower
The
East
Bowery?
Side somewhere. Yeah, just some
Yeah.
tiny little like
Okay.
south of Union Square Park. You just
Yeah.
walk down into that little like artsy district, and one of these
Yeah.
little hole in the wall things that I saw.
Yeah.
And I had never seen live theater before. And oh my God, I was so like
Yeah.
moved and involved. And I was like, what is this that I've never experienced? Because I've only ever experienced that in dance, right? Like
Yeah.
I had watched all these great dancers and I would be so moved and so involved with that art form, but I had never like been so impacted by just like people talking, you know? And
Yeah.
I remember just like the show ended and I was just like stunned.
Well,
What
yeah,
did
let's
you
get
see? Like,
more. Give me more.
yes. Yeah. And I remember there was this actor who played, I think in the play, he's like a 80-year-old man, you know,
Mm,
and he was this African American actor. And I remember, you know, he had like grayed his hair, all these theater things. And like, I didn't, you know, I thought only
yeah.
ballets did that. So he had like aged himself and the work was so specific and his character work was so good. And he really looked like this old man. And then the show ended and he walked out, he was like 25.
Wow.
Like, and I was just like, what?
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah, I thought he was an 80. I was just blown away.
Yeah.
And that's when I was kind of like, oh, well, if that's acting, I want to do that. Like,
Yeah.
let's do that. And that really kind of put me on a more serious trajectory
Yeah.
because before I was taking classes to kill time. And then afterwards I was like, wait, this is a whole nother ball game. Like, this is cool.
Yeah.
I want
Yeah.
to
It's
get
like, well,
back
it's
to
like,
it.
it's just like ballet. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
layers and layers and layers and layers. I mean,
Yeah.
so you went to a conservatory. Where did you go for conservatory for
Well,
acting?
it wasn't like full on. I say conservatory just because the amount of
You just,
classes I took.
the amount of classes.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mostly took it was like one of those studios that's just it's mostly for like casting workshops and stuff. I just happened to
Yeah.
have a great teacher there who I still sometimes coach with for certain things. Her name is Valerie Kingston, and it was
Oh,
called PBI Actor Studio, and she taught Uta Hagen technique. So
yeah.
I took her scene study class for those 2 years. And then I did go to Lee Strasberg for a full semester, but it
Yeah.
was so
I went there.
expensive.
Yeah. I went there for a year. That was, it wasn't as hard as the neighborhood playhouse where like you basically had to be there from like 9 to 5 every
Oh,
day.
wow.
And you were just thrown into it. Whereas Lee, you got to like pick your classes, which I liked. You got to like kind of fix your
Yeah.
time. It wasn't just like, okay, you come in here and you're just gonna live here basically at
Yeah.
school. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, one thing I liked about Lee Strasberg was the sort of, because you could pick your classes, but the like, you know,
Yeah.
22 hours a week kind of immersion feel of it. Because I think it reminded me more of being a dancer, right? Like the
Yeah.
singular thing. You're like, you're here and you take all these classes. And so I remember I mean, you have like the twice a week scene study and technique stuff. And then I had a wonderful script analysis teacher, Ted Sikowski, I think his
Yeah.
name.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
I know Ted. He's a great guy.
Oh,
He's such a great storyteller.
he was so great. Um, and I think I had Bill Balzac and
Yeah,
Lola
I know Bill.
Cohen.
Bill was great.
Yeah.
Character study. We have, you're all sitting in the room. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. So
know
I
all these.
liked that there was all these different aspects of it.
Did you have
Which was
Irma as your core person?
No, I had I think is it Lola Cohen?
Lola. Oh, I love Lola. She
Yeah,
wrote the book.
I think I
She
had
wrote that.
her.
Yeah.
She wasn't a huge fan of me.
No,
Not like
she's,
in a bad way. I think she just was a little confused by me, which come to
yeah,
think of it, like makes sense. I think I was confused about myself in a lot of ways because I was
yeah,
in the middle of this weird like life transition and like didn't really know what
yeah.
I was doing yet. So I'm
I
sure
mean,
that
Lola's, yeah, very, very
yeah.
strict. If you introduce say like any other acting form to her, she's like, no, 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 Lee Strasberg's the best.
Yeah.
She'll let you have it.
She'd be like, forget what you learned, like just do this. I was kind of like, oh, I don't know if that's how I don't know if it
Yeah,
works for me. But I
yeah,
did learn a lot there. And like I said, I liked, that was the closest to like conservatory because I was doing like the full time
yeah.
program or whatever. But yeah, those are the main places I studied.
That's cool. That's great. Yeah, no, that's awesome. We have that in common. We all know
Yeah,
all the same teachers.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So that was a fun time. So, all right. I watched a lot of your reel and I watched Longmire and everything. I love that. So did you when did you go to LA? Because right now you're in LA.
yeah. So basically, when I was 18 and I had had the surgery and I was recovering from the surgery, and I was just like running out of money
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I was taking all these
All of
acting
us.
classes.
Yeah.
And New
I had
York
to
is
take
just
student loans for
yeah,
the,
like
so
it's
I mean,
just
it's
brutal.
crazy.
Mm. So I went home to Albuquerque for about a year and a half just to like
Mm.
teach dance, make a little money, finish my recovery with my knee,
Yeah.
try to get back into shape. And during that time, I'd fly back to New York for doctor's appointments because I was still kind of in process of finding out what would
Yeah.
really happen to me. So I actually wasn't living in New York anymore when they told me I couldn't dance anymore. I was back home. So that was a really shitty trip. I remember I was like, went out to New York and and I went for like 5 days because I wanted to see all my friends and say hi to the company. And I was like staying at the Y on 63rd or whatever. And I remember like the water there made me break out. So I had like horrible skin and
Oh
went to see
no.
all my friends and I was so out of shape. And I tried to take a company class and it was just kind of humiliating and sad. And I was
Yeah.
starting to know that something wasn't right with my knee. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't, they call it power, but like I couldn't jump on one leg. Like I had power issues. Like these like weird
Mhm.
strength issues, it would give out sometimes. So I had this kind of like nagging feeling that something wasn't as
Yeah.
great as they wanted it to be. Um, and so I remember they gave me the news and I had like 3 more days in New York. And I think I sat in the Y and I ate licorice and read the entire Twilight series just in this like bizarre, sad day.
This
I just didn't
speaks
know
to
what to do.
me.
I was like, I can't go back to the studio because now I like
Yeah.
know that I'm not going to do this anymore. And it was just weird. Like I was like alone and like just not quite, I was a little in denial still. And
Yeah.
yeah. So, but at that point I was 20.
Yeah.
So I had been at home, I had been working, and I was kind of like, all right, well, I guess I need to figure out what I'm going to do next. So I started trying to decide if I wanted to act in New York or act in LA.
Mm.
And I still had connections with that TVI actor studio, and they had an LA program that did a bunch of casting workshops and stuff. So I was like, well, maybe I'll just go meet a bunch of casting directors and see what they tell me, and I'll kind of know my
Mm.
answer. So I came out here for like 3 weeks for one of their little like intensives. And it was such a different experience from when I tried to do acting in New York, because in New York, I mean, it's funny. When I was a dancer, I had a couple agents try to sign me and I was like, I'm not an actor. Like, I don't need an
Yeah.
agent. Now I like kick myself because I look back and I was like,
Yeah.
those were really great companies. So like, what was I thinking?
What were you
Um,
thinking? But you were young. I mean, what are you gonna do? I mean,
well, and
unless
I had
somebody's
a career,
telling
and
you.
that was probably why they wanted to sign me, because I already had a career and I didn't need them. You know that thing about actors not needing things?
Is that not the truth? You know,
Yeah.
you got to show up
So
with the feel. I need you, but I don't need you type of thing.
yeah, yeah. And so when I actually needed an agent, I could not get one.
And then yeah, now they're like, oh, not now you want to see us.
Or they're like, now you want
Well,
now
we're
we're not.
closed.
Yeah, yeah. So what I really noticed as a difference was I'm mixed race, and in
Yeah,
New York, it was like an issue for a lot of the reps. They were like, we don't really know how to market you
really.
because you're not quite Asian enough, you're not quite white enough. Like, we don't really know how to sell you. And I kept being like, that's a weird thing to say. But I kept hearing it. I kept hearing and kept hearing. So I was
Yeah,
like, okay, I'm gonna have to like solve this thing. And then I went to LA and they were like, you could be Mexican, you could be indigenous, you can be this,
yeah,
you can be that. It's
yeah,
so great. And I was like, well, let's go where the like door is open,
yeah.
you know.
Let's go where they actually care. You know, not where they're
Well,
like,
they
well, we
want,
don't know
yeah,
what to
and
do
they
with
see it
you.
as a positive and not a issue they have to
Yeah.
solve, you know. So that was the deciding factor. And then I moved here in 2010 in
Mm.
January. And I had read, while I was at home, I had read all the acting, there's no like acting schools, or there weren't at the time. So I
Yeah,
was just reading all the acting books I could find because I wanted to keep
yeah,
learning. And now I was like, I want to be a serious actor. So like I have to learn ways of the serious
yeah,
actor. So I was reading everything I could get my hands on. And and my parents were very supportive of that part. They're like, oh, reading books, that's good. We could do here's some
yeah,
more, here's more.
yeah.
So for Christmas, my dad got me Milton Katselas' book,
Oh,
Take a
yeah.
Seat. And I was like, this is so practical. And I had read, all the like really artsy out there ones,
An actor prepares.
Yeah. And all the sort of like philosophizing about acting. And then this guy came
Which
through
feels
with
so
like,
outdated today now, that actor prepares. It's like, yeah, but that's like a completely different world.
It is a completely different world. And it's not unvaluable. It has,
no, it's not. But there's not the time like there
and it's
was
not
back
really
then.
like something you can practically apply to your career now. I mean, you might experiment with some of the ideas if you're working on scenes in a class or something like that, but you can't really like just be like, I'm going to take that into my like NCIS audition tomorrow. Like it just isn't quite really gonna get you.
No, I've got to hold on, just give me a second, let me do the coffee cup. It'll be like, they'll be like, what is he doing? He's weird, leave.
yeah where you're like, I need 10 minutes to like find my privacy or whatever.
So let me do a private moment.
And they're like,
I brought my sleeping bag.
They're like, you're a barista, can you just say thank you, sir, and then move on?
Get out.
So what I liked about Milton's book was the sort of practical aspect of it. And so I found out that he had a school in LA. He had already died, I didn't know that, but I found out there was a place where he taught people the way he taught people.
I'm here for Milton. We're sorry to say.
And they were like, yeah, he died in 2008. And I was like, oh, snap. Anyway, so I signed up with the Beverly Hills Playhouse, and that was sort of the final deciding of like, okay, I'm definitely going to go West Coast. I found a place to train. I found, reps that think that I'm a good thing instead of a problem, And
see, I love that about you already, that like you were all about, I need to be trained. I feel like there's a lot of people today that's just like, oh, I'll just be an actor. I'll take, it's like, no, you got to like really you got to put yourself all into this. You can't just kind of halfway.
You really need to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like,
it's true.
I think it's funny that people don't think that that's necessary, or that they're going to have a good time in their carear without like,
I'll just wing it. It's like, no.
Yeah, could you imagine like winging being a dentist or something? Yeah, just figure it out. Like, no.
I took a couple of courses. Is it okay if I go into your teeth? And it's like, no. Get me somebody who knows what they're doing.
Exactly.
You would run any other profession. They come in and tell you like, oh, I'm a doctor. I took a year here.
They're like, I watched a lot on like YouTube, what the heck? Yeah.
You'd be like, so no.
I've always wanted to train. And I also, when you first get the like acting bug or whatever you call it, and you start reading about what the actors you really liked did, right? And every single one that I really liked studied.
Yeah.
Like they all talked about what school they went to. They all talked about their teachers. Like, and it coming from dance, I was like, well, of course you studied. Like you have to, like you have to practice.
Which is such a blessing because you came from dance. So you know about that work ethic. So that's coming back to is like, did it make you tougher? Because I mean, like coming into this business, you got to do kind of the same thing. I mean, you pivoted like dance is in some ways similar to acting, but it's a completely different way because now you're using your voice, now you're using that. Whereas there you're using your body. But those things all come into play. So, I mean, it wasn't like you wasted time.
Right. Right. Totally.
Yeah. Interesting. So who was your like main teacher in LA?
Well, I started in like the intermediate class. So I had a couple different teachers, Gary Grossman, Rick Cadell, Art Cohan, and then I moved up into the advanced class, which is primarily Alan Barton, who's the current owner of the school. And ironically enough, I actually now teach at that school.
Really? Yeah. Because in your interview, you talked about the company that you started, which we're going to get to in a minute. Alan Barton gives you guys a lot of time, and that's interesting. So you talked about producing and directing. Which came first?
Producing came first. So even though LA was a far more mixed race friendly town, I still wasn't really booking much when I first got here. And I was very frustrated by that because part of me was just like, I'm ready to work. And I thought that would be, clearly somebody will hire me. well, that's not really true. So
No.
I started having to like make my own content to
Yeah.
just get experience and to learn about being on set because, you know, I like on stage scene study where you're like theater based because I think that's the better training. So
Yeah.
that's what I was doing at BHP or Beverly Hills Playhouse. And then I was like, I need to learn how to do this on camera. And you can take classes, but you really can't replicate what set is like very
No.
easily. You kind of like have to
No.
be on set doing a
It's
job.
the whole time aspect. When
Yeah.
when you're doing a scene study, it's like there's nobody going, okay, we just had to rewrite this here. Go do it now. You know,
Yeah.
you can't really. I mean, I guess you could maybe. I mean, maybe that's the next way of doing a class. Like, okay, we're gonna replicate a set. Give them rewrites at the last minute.
Yeah, but it's also hard because like understanding like the weird things you do with your face in a close up
Yeah.
and what tension looks like and all these things, it's like you kind of have to learn by doing.
Yeah.
So I
Absolutely.
started producing basically to get more experience on camera. And I remember when I got here, I mean, I would try to get in front of any kind of camera. So I did a lot of like crappy amateur modeling, like anything. I just like needed to
Yeah.
learn angles and what I look like, which is not really very pleasant, but I understood it would be important.
Yeah.
So yeah, like anything in front of a camera I tried to do. And so I started producing basically to give myself more chances to do that. The directing thing came, it's funny, I've never really chased directing, but directing happens a lot with me. So I end up
Yeah.
directing a lot and I actually really enjoy it. And the directing kind of happened because I didn't know directors. So I was like, well, I guess I'll direct it myself, but
Mm.
I need to know what that is. That I need to like know how to direct something myself. And it's such an ethereal thing, like producing and directing. People are like, what do you do? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I do know, but it's hard to define in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. Because producing is like you make sure that the thing happens. Like that's honestly what it feels like. It's like
So I'm
whatever
just
it
curious
takes.
about the producing thing. So would you just tell people that you're a producer, or like how would you get involved as I'm just
Um,
curious.
well, I would like write a script and then decide to make it. And
Mhm.
then I realized that all the people I called necessary to make it would be like, so you're producing this. And I was like, oh yes, I guess that
I am.
I
Yes.
am. Yeah.
I believe I
And
am.
that's sort of how that happened. And then I went,
Interesting.
oh, so that's what producers do. So I guess I
You
am
just kind of
one.
like fell into it and just were like, yes, I am that.
Yeah. And then very true to form, as soon as I'm like, okay, so that's what this is, I go try to find out as much as I can about that. So then I started reading all these producing books and learning about like indie filmmaking and what that looks like from the producing end. So that, and similar with directing, I started looking at like, can I teach myself what they learn at film school? Because I was like, I guess that's what directors do is they go to film school and they do
Yeah, a
like
lot
their
of them
short
do.
films and yeah. And what they're learning there is how to design their shots and plan a shoot, right? Plan the visual aspects
Yeah.
of a story and the color palettes and the themes and whether the tone of the acting is going to be a certain way or not. And so I kind of was like, oh, this is all stuff I can learn how to do. And so I started learning how to do it. And then I ended up getting to do it a lot, actually. So it's kind of like, oh, well, this is fun. And it's acting related. So pretty much
So
anything acting related, I was like, I don't see a downside.
yeah.
I'll
So
just
so
do all
so
of it.
you started with writing first in
I
some
guess so.
ways.
I didn't really think of myself as a writer at the time, but I was writing just because I needed something to act.
Yeah. That's great.
So I would write something so that I could act something. And it didn't
I love how
really,
proactive you are. You were like, okay, I need to do something here. I'm going to write this. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure this out. That's
yeah,
great. I think a lot of that comes from being in ballet, where it's like, I'm not going to sit here and waste time.
yeah.
Let's get going. So yeah, so you started producing, and then you started kind of like directing. You kind of like, people were like, okay, here we go. Can you direct this? And you kind of just figured that out.
Yeah.
Um, then you created.
the name. Crimson Square Theater Company. Is
Yes.
does that come before? Does that come before V3 Productions?
No. They're kind of yeah, actually, I guess it does. Right. Yeah. I mean, I had other production companies I had tried to start prior. I've definitely been producing films and shorts and stuff much longer than theater. But V3 was my first like solo endeavor producing. I didn't have a business partner. And I started that in 2019. And then Crimson Square was basically winter of 2018. So it's like right around the same time. Yeah. And Crimson Square kind of came about by accident initially. A friend of mine had asked me, because he knew I had produced films. So he said, I'm going to do this one-man show called I Am My Own Wife. I don't know if you're familiar. It's like,
I think I've heard.
it's based on a real person, but it's a crazy show. You have to play like 34 different characters. And he was very talented and I believed in him. And I was like, yeah, I'll produce your show. Because again, I was like, well, I'll figure out what that means. I'll figure out what producing theater is like, you know?
Yeah.
And this kid, you know, took extra bartending shifts. His name is Alec Norris. And he's like 22 at the time, I think. So he did like extra bartending shifts for 6 months to save up money to do this show. And, you know, he said, I have $8,000 and I want to do the show. Can you help me produce this? And so I was like, okay. And then through the course of it, I went, wow, theater does not make any money back. Like, this is a really good way to just set your money on fire.
It's like a restaurant.
Yeah.
It's not gonna,
I felt really bad that the poorest group, right? These like struggling actors were having to like come up with money they would never earn back just to do more acting. You know what I mean? Like it bothered me. I was like, there's gotta be a better way than this. So I did a Kickstarter campaign and we were trying to raise $30,000 and we raised 6. And I was like, okay, so we have $6,000, not $30,000. Okay. But I was like, you know, we're going to figure it out as we go. Yeah. So we did our first official Crimson Square show with that $6,000. And we almost broke even on that show. So it actually enabled us to do 2 more shows that year. So we did Dinner with Friends, the Margulies play.
Yeah,
and then
I saw that.
And then after that, we did Cop by Mike Bartlett. And then COVID hit. So that sort of, you know, shut us down for a while. But basically my concept with Crimson Square was to put together very seasoned actors with emerging talent in professional plays. Same with, you know, having mentoring directors with newer directors and mentoring lighting designers and, you know, all these people who are pros sort of like have apprentices, because I feel like, again, there's no better way to learn than by doing. But I didn't want to be part of something that was just amateur and a bunch of students. Like there's so much bad theater in LA.
Yes.
We don't need more mediocrity in the theater. We really don't. We don't. So I was like, I don't want it to be mediocre. I want it to be on the same level as all the big houses, but I want to give the opportunities to younger people who are not established yet so that they get to be taken seriously. They get to do a real show with real sets and real plays and real directors, and everybody can just learn and sort of like, you know, that quote about when the tide rises, all the ships rise, right? Like I was like, let's be like what Steppenwolf does. Let's sort of be the ground where people can workshop new plays that eventually become more important. And, you know, let's get new writers, let's get new directors. And so that's really the concept behind Crimson Square, is that they're professional shows. We hire a publicist. We provide the like backing and the support for all these actors and directors and writers to sort of break their teeth on real shit.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that you're putting them though with mentors, and you're not just doing it with just actors and just directors. You're looking at all the other things. So in some ways you're almost, it's almost like a finishing school in some ways.
A little bit. Like, like that's the idea, is like that you can come and you can learn like stagecraft.
Yeah.
And then hopefully go do it professionally somewhere
Yeah.
for lots of money, hopefully.
So tell me about V3 Productions now.
Okay, so V3 is my third production company. Like I said, it was the first time I went out solo, which was really good for me because I think I had taken on business partners before, mostly because I lacked the confidence to be like, I can do this by myself. Some of that insecurity came from the fact that I didn't go to college and I didn't get an academic degree. And I realized that a lot of filmmaking is like talking to people about asking them for money. And I was like, I don't know. I feel like it'd be easier if I had a degree in finance or something to be like, trust me, I'm not going to like destroy your investment.
Yeah.
But you actually can't guarantee that as a filmmaker because you don't know if your movie's going to do well. So
No,
you actually
it's a
just have to
gamble.
get better at asking people for money anyway. But what I found is in my prior two companies, I had taken on very strong personalities because I lacked the confidence. And then it caused a lot of problems later on because they were very strong personalities. And I was like, oh, well, lesson learned. So I just have to toughen up a little bit. And yeah, so I went off on my own and I pretty much just tried to develop indie films and TV pilots and things. Our first contract was for UCLA Law School. We did like curriculum supplement videos. They have a program that is called experiential learning. So it's like where the lawyers or the law students actually can like pretend they're at trial and like do mock trials and stuff. And they use a lot of actors for those. So part of that course was they have to like observe client lawyer like interviews. And so we produced a bunch of those. We produced like 18 or 20 videos for the school to use as their curriculum, where they like watch these interactions with like staged lawyer client interviews. And then they talk about reading facial reactions and tone and, you know, if you're not supposed to say something, to say something, how you phrase certain things like that. So that was our first gig and it was really fun. And then after that, we had a couple indie films sort of like in development, but then COVID hit. So during COVID, I just focused a lot on writing the thing about production companies is it sounds really fancy to say you have a production company, but if you don't actually have anything to sell, you don't really have anything.
You're just a name. This is my company. Oh, what have you done? Nothing.
Nothing at all. Yeah. So during COVID, I mostly just tried to focus on getting scripts ready to like when the world returned to sort of have stuff that you can take out to the marketplace and try to put together. And in the meantime, you know, we do short films still sometimes, and music videos, web series, things like that sometimes. Little bit of commercial work. I don't really like focus on commercials that much. There's just people who do it better. There's bigger houses that do it better. And it's like, it's not really my thing. I don't really want to go chasing after something like that. I'm sure the money is nice. That would be the one downfall of being like, I'm going to do these artistic things. It's like, you're going to be broke for a lot longer, but it is nice to see something go from nothing to a finished product. And I think that's the most rewarding part, because producing is very tedious. It's a lot like accounting. It's a lot of like budgeting. It's not like fun work in that regard, but taking somebody's concept, working with the writer, developing a script, and then eventually seeing that script like on a screen as a finished product is very, very fun. So I like that part of it.
Interesting.
Okay, that about does it for this episode of the DMF. I want to thank my guest, Faye Viviana. This is only part 1. Stay tuned for part 2. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving it a review and think about subscribing. As always, you can find me at Justin Yachts, and I will see you next time on the DMF.